The law of receptivity says the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. Now, first, this means nothing more than understanding that, you breathe out, you also have to breathe in. Giving and receiving in flow, giving and receiving are not opposite concepts. They're simply two sides of the same coin. They work in tandem.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Create a Rare Experience podcast. I'm your host, Joe Hamilton, and I am here with one of my mentors who I've actually never met, but he's been a mentor of mine for many years. This is Bob Burg. Bob is one of the co-authors, along with John David Mann, of one of my favorite books, The Go-Giver, as well as many other books. And so he's a best-selling author. And one of his things with the Go-Giver is he teaches all about being a go-giver and bringing value to other people, everybody that you come in contact with, which is something that we're all about here at Vortex, and also in regards to creating rare experience. So just want to welcome him. Bob, thank you for being here. Some people dream about meeting Michael Jordan or people like that. For me, I dream about meeting Bob Burg as a mentor of, again, one of my favorite books, The Go-Giver. So thanks for being here.
That's very nice of you. What a nice thing to hear. It's very gratifying. Thank you, Joe.
Good. So The Go-Giver is one of the best-selling books in the personal development and business space. I was looking on the website. It says over 1 million copies sold. And I personally think that number has to be wrong. It's low because I think I've given away about 1 million copies. In fact, we've got a few people internally that have got a little contest about how often we give that book away because we just think it resonates with kind of the values and ethos of Vortex. So
I appreciate that, and I know your team has been just absolutely fantastic. You've not only been those personal walking ambassadors that are discussed in the book, but you've been embodiments of the message as well. So we just really appreciate you. And yeah, it's climbing. It's well over 1.5 million now, and we'll see how long it takes to get to the 2 million.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have some exciting ways, I think, when we launch this podcast episode of giving away many of those books. So for people listening, stay tuned for more of that. We're going to be giving away a lot of this book. It's brought so much value to me personally, but also to our business and, of course, everybody that we interact with. So again, thank you for writing it, and thank you for being here. So I kind of did a little bit of an introduction, but Bob, I actually like it when people introduce themselves. I love to hear from their perspective, kind of who they are and what they're all about. So could you just take just a few moments and do that for us and introduce yourself?
Yeah, really just began as a broadcaster, and I thought that's what I was going to be. I actually grew up wanting to be I told you beforehand, I grew up in the greater Boston area. And so my dream growing up was to be the third baseman for the Boston Red Sox. And I think I could have done it had I had one thing, and that would be talent. And I had none of that. So that wasn't happening. But I started out in broadcasting first on sports radio. And then I was the late night news guy for a very small ABC affiliate in the Midwestern United States. And I wasn't very good at that either. so I sort of stumbled into sales, right? And Joe, I had no idea what to do because I had never had any formal sales training. So for the first few months, I was really lost. And then one day I went into a book. I mean, I could make the calls. I could knock on doors. I could make calls. I could see people. But I didn't know what I was doing. I had with Jim Rohn. I don't know if you're familiar with Jim Rohn. He was a great, And he used to say, he would have said, I had the motivation, but not the information. All right. Of course, you need both, right? You need the information, and you have to be motivated enough to go out there and do it as well. But I didn't have the information part. So fortunately, one day I'm in a bookstore, and I didn't really know what I was looking for because I didn't know there was such a thing as sales books. I mean, this is 40 years ago. So back then, we're talking about a different time. But I came across a couple of books, one by Zig Ziglar, who you may be familiar with, and another by Tom Hopkins. Those are two icons in the sales space. And Tom Hopkins' book was called How to Master the Art of Selling. And I was inspired right there. Wow. You mean there's actually a way to do this that I don't know about? So I took their books home, and I just started studying at night and into the wee hours of the morning, and highlighting and underlining and taking notes and rereading and practicing and the whole thing. within a few weeks, my sales began to go through the roof. Now, the interesting thing is there wasn't a whole lot of change in me personally within that 3 weeks, but I now had a methodology. I had a system for doing this. Now, personally, I'm always defining things, so you'll probably hear me say this an obnoxious number of times during our conversation, but I define a system as simply the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how-to principles. The key being predictability. If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired results of B, then you just need to do A and continue to do A, and you'll get the desired results of B. And that's what happened. But what also, though, took place was, they would say in the book they'd be recommending other books, and they weren't always about sales specifically. They were books like How to Win Friends and Influence People, The Magic of Thinking Big, Think and Grow Rich, Psycho-Cybernetics, and The Greatest Salesman in the World, and all these different books. And I just started becoming a student. I mean, this is when it really hit home. And what I realized is that success is really an inside job. I mean, it manifests outwardly, okay? But it begins in here in the head and then in the heart. And you become that person, right, who is in a position to create success. So while the how-to aspect of sales is certainly very important, absolutely, it really is, do we build ourselves through the information we take in and then apply? That's also very important. In order to grow into that right kind of person. That's really my story. And from there, I just became a maniac in terms of, sales and personal development and, bettering myself in some way and so forth.
So that's awesome. And actually at some point I'd love to talk a little bit about how I got introduced to the Go-Giver. There's some similarities there as a sales background. But one thing I'm curious about is so you're a student. I love the inside out game. Things start inside, and you're becoming a different person inside, and you're applying the things that you're learning and who you're becoming, and it's working, and you're gaining this momentum, and you're getting the desired results. But I'm curious what caused the pivot to being an author. Obviously, you were extremely avid reader. So was it that? And then I'd love to unpack, of course, how we got to the Go-Giver.
Yeah. So eventually, after several years in sales, what have you, I was sales manager of another company, and I took my team to a seminar, which was Zig Ziglar was coming into town. I had, read his books and his, all these things, and so I was a huge fan, and so I took the whole team to it, and at the end, not only did I buy more of Zig stuff, but there was another guy speaking, and I bought his stuff too. And back then, these are called cassette tape albums. That's how long ago this was. And one step above 8-track tapes.
Right. Yep. I remember cassette tapes. 8 tracks.
Right.
That's a little bit before my time.
Right. That's more my.
Yep.
Yeah. And so at the end of this guy's tape, this other guy, his name was Billy Burg, great speaker, great guy. But at the end of his tapes, on the back, there was a thing that said, if you're interested in learning how to become a speaker and selling these tapes, call our office and we'll show you how. Okay, that's a pretty good idea. It sounds like fun, right? And so they trained how to go into, and I would go into I do all sorts of free talks, for every civic club, group, organization that would have me. I'd speak for 25 minutes, and then they taught me how to sell his tapes in the back. So I'd buy them at a discount and sell them. And I just went nuts with it and had a lot of fun. But eventually I thought, I can really talk about the things I've learned and the things that are more, specific to me and how to, do and so I went into business as a speaker. And after several years of doing this, I was, and at the time, what I was really talking about was really business networking, and that's when it was just coming into the public picture. And I was at a National Speakers Association convention, And a couple of the guys there, some of the veterans there said, Burg, you're really ready at this point to write a book. And I said, I really have no desire to write a book. I kind of, I get paid for speaking. I wasn't getting paid a lot back then. This is in the 90s, and I was just really kind of starting out. But so it wasn't like but I was making a lot more money selling my tapes that I had put together at that time.
Okay.
And I was having fun doing it. But they said, no, the reason you want to write a book is because if you do, you're going to position yourself in the marketplace as an authority in your field. It's going to make you more marketable. You're going to get higher fees. Right. And all the reasons we know that writing a book can be a good thing. So I actually wrote my first book, which was called Endless Referrals. And the subtitle was Network Your Everyday Contacts into Sales. And it was really it was a how-to book for entrepreneurs and salespeople who knew they had a great product or service. They knew it brought lots of value to people, but they didn't necessarily feel comfortable or confident in going into their local communities and developing the kind of relationships where people would want to buy from them directly and or refer them to others. So that's what the book was. And it was it was a book that, again, it did exactly what those guys said it would do. It's always good to listen to the people who know more than we do. And so that's good. But I always had loved reading business parables since I'd been in sales. For Ogmandinos was the first I read, the greatest salesman in the world, and many of his other wonderful parables. But then they were the 1 minute salesperson, the 1 minute manager by Doctors Blanchard and Johnson, and many others. And these days there's tons of them, and they're all great. I mean, I love reading them today. But I always thought, wouldn't it be great if we could take the basic premise of Endless Referrals, which was all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. That's what it was about, the endless referrals. And really take the basic idea and turn it into a parable. The challenge is I'm not a parable writer. I'm a how-to guy. I'm that boring step-by-step, step 1, step 2, step 3, right? Fortunately, in the early 2000s, I met this guy named John David Mann. He was the editor-in-chief of a magazine I was writing for as a columnist, a monthly column. And even back then, John had a fantastic reputation, wonderful reputation as a great writer, which he was, but also as a great human being and so forth. And so in time, I brought this idea to John about this little thing. I kind of had the title, but really there was nothing else substantial. And I just said, I would love if this is something that you feel is worthy for you to work with me and be the lead writer storyteller, because I knew he could work magic with this. Now, even back then, he was still very busy. And he said to his back then fiance, now wife, Anna, he said, I really don't have time to do this, but it's Bob. How can I just say no without at least talking to him? And that's where the relationship comes in, right? That's where the know, like, and trust. If we hadn't had that, I wouldn't.
It would have been a no.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great guy, but he would have politely just said no. And so he and Anna were visiting her mom, who lived across the state from me in the Tampa area. I live in Jupiter, Florida, which is near West Palm Beach on the ocean side. So one day they take a 4-hour drive. It should be like it's 2 hours as the crow flies, but if the crow has to go I-60 east and then hit the turnpike, especially at rush hour, it's like 4 hours. And we spent about 4 hours at dinner that night talking about what the book would be. And then they drove back. And it was about 3 weeks later that he called and said, this is a good idea. Let's do this. I think we can make this work. Now, here's the interesting thing. With John's expert writing, we did that. We polished this in 3 months. Okay. But our agent, who's fantastic, she took this to New York, to all the publishing houses. It took a year and 24 no's before the 25th one, Portfolio, an imprint of Penguin Random House, said yes. So it wasn't just like anything else. You can have a good product, right? But it's still sales.
Yeah.
You got to get through a lot of no's, and you got to be able to do that and be able to listen to the advice and decide what's good and what isn't, and where you can improve and the different things. So, yeah.
That's incredible. There's so many things that stuck out. I think one of the things that stuck out, and I don't think I'm projecting here, but it was like all these series of pivots you were in sales, you were this avid reader, and usually as typical, and I'd love to ask you a question on this, sales performers often get promoted to sales managers, which can be good or bad. And then, right, because it's a different job.
You are right.
It's a different skill set.
Yep.
And then, from there, you kind of go to these sales, Zig Ziglar and these presentations, and then you find out, oh, like I can be a presenter. Then you start being a presenter, presenting other people's stuff, then your stuff. And then, eventually it's like, oh, you got to write a book. So then you write this book. And it was just like a series of pivots. It wasn't like you just sat down, you got done with college and you sat down and wrote The Go-Giver. And like you said, the first person you went to, it took 24 no's to get to the yes. So I just love the fact, I think what it shows a lot of times when you look at businesses or you look at individuals that have been successful, it isn't just this, point A to point B that's, 50 steps down. It's just these series of pivots. And it's like you leaned into all these little experiments and here you are.
Joe, first of all, you made a couple of great points in there. And let me go to the first one that I want to just provide just my thought on it. You said going from salesperson to sales manager you're totally right. I was a horrible sales manager. Okay. I was a really good producer. I was not a good sales manager. Remember, when I first got into sales, I didn't know anything about sales. I had to learn. When I got into sales management or sales leadership, I didn't know anything about sales management or sales leadership. I was awful. Now, the one thing I did well was I took it whenever I went out. I kept presenting and taking my salespeople out with me so they could observe.
Sure,
and I would always go with them so I could. That was a. But as far as leading a team, inspiring a team, meeting them. No, and so it wasn't until really a couple of years after that a gal I was dating at the time, her mom, when she found out I was a sales manager and that I didn't really think I was that good at doing that, she bought a book for her daughter to give to me, and it was by John Maxwell, who, of course, he
sneezes and he writes a new book.
Exactly. And so I just started to really, I started reading his books, and then I subscribed. And these were tapes. It was a thing called Maximum Impact that he had. And it was like a monthly tape with lessons, and I started So, again, it was something you get into something and you don't necessarily know what you're doing. And, you make the choice to learn and to grow. So that's the first thing. But yeah, what you said about the pivots and it's just a matter of not staying where you are and always having gratitude for where you are, but realizing that's just the next step. You still continue to grow. And as long as we're in growth mode, and I think you just nailed that.
So sure. I think, and if we could just stay on that for a minute, one of the things that jumps out, and I'm not anti-goal by any means, but I think sometimes there's an overemphasis on what's your 5-year, 10-year, what's your 20-year plan.
I agree.
And I think if somebody had, I'm projecting here, but I think if somebody had asked you when you'd first gotten into sales, hey, what's your 10-year vision, or however long that period was before you wrote your first book, or maybe wrote The Go-Giver, I'm guessing maybe you wouldn't have articulated that as your big goal.
No, right. No.
And so I think to hold those big goals you have loosely as opposed to too tightly allows you then to be open to some of these opportunities.
Yeah. And it's also, and I first learned this from reading a book. It was by Scott Adams. I don't know if you remember him. He just passed away recently.
I do. Yeah. I've read several of his pieces.
Dilberts.
The Dilberts. And then he's got a few books.
I've read several of his books, and he's quite brilliant. And one of them was how I went from, and I'm not going to get this totally right, how I went from failure to failure and still reach success, or
yes,
that's something like. And
I know the book you're talking about. I don't know the title offhand.
And that's
how to fail at almost everything and still be successful.
Yeah. And then at the end, the subtitle was like kind of the story of my life,
right.
Something like
yeah.
And that's where he kind of said, systems are fine, or he said goals are fine. Actually, he didn't even say they're fine. He kind of disparaged goals, and I don't quite agree with that. I think there's a time and place for goals. But he said, but the key is to have systems. And that's, again, what did I say? System was earlier, process of predictably, right? So it's setting up systems, okay, that create, and I got this term from, again, the brilliant John David Mann, that create the benevolent context for your success.
Yeah. And I would even just hearing your story, I would say that one of the just really macro systems that it seems that you built from, 100,000 feet is just the system of constantly learning. Is that you were just a lifelong learner, and then you knew when you got into something new, well, this is a new thing to learn and to master, and I can't just be, as opposed to just being, am I just a natural at this?
Yeah, and
with the exception of the third baseman of the Red Sox.
And,
I don't know if
yeah.
based off what you described, there may not have been. Same for me. I wanted to be Joe Montana. I don't think any system was helping me.
I was the guy who, like, in Little League, while I'm at third base, I'm actually calling the play-by-play.
Oh, yeah, the broadcasting. So it made sense.
Burg makes a diving stop.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, but here's the thing. When I was younger, because, I talked about being a good learner and I believe, every great leader is first a great follower, right? But when I was younger, I was not very coachable. I was not very teachable. I was one of these guys who kind of thought he knew, and I think back to, Mark Twain is attributed with a saying, and I don't know that he ever said it, but it sounds very Twainian, and that is, it ain't what you don't know that gets into trouble. It's what you're positively sure you do know that just ain't so. And that was me. There were a lot of things before I really started getting into sales, right? And started to learn. That's when I kind of was learning that I didn't know what I thought I knew and so forth. Before then, I wasn't very coachable.
So was it that moment of sales of kind of, if I may, getting kicked in the teeth? That you're like, whoa.
It was a kick in the teeth. Yeah. It's when I realized I don't know anything to what I think. I thought I had everything figured out, human nature and this. No, I didn't. And so once that kick in the teeth came and I was ready to accept it, there had probably been others that I just didn't pay attention to.
Right. Great point.
Then that's when the learning really started.
Yeah. Well, kudos for you for finally kind of turning that corner there. But yeah, sales is a great, especially when your rent and your food are relying on how well you're doing. There's one of the best training grounds certainly for understanding how much you don't know. Yeah. So I was hoping I could share with you a little bit about how I came into the Go-Giver.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I won't give my whole background, but I grew up the son. I got three other brothers, same son of an entrepreneur. So I grew up in the store. Grew up in the business, and
was this in Wisconsin?
This is in Wisconsin. My parents owned a Wild Birds Unlimited store. Then they transitioned, and they grew out of that this store for sport optics. It was mail order, and then we eventually, when I got out of college, my dad had started Vortex, and me and my brother and a few other people had kind of started that. And but so I and my dad was a natural go-giver. Okay. And so I learned that. And so when we started Vortex, now looking back, I think I was fairly unconsciously competent at being a go-giver. So not great at it, but pretty good, but not necessarily knowing why I was good, probably because of the model that I had.
You had a good example, just like I did. You had a great example. Exactly.
So the business started to grow, and this is around, we'd started it in 2002. It was around 2007, 2008. Is the business is growing. We're starting to get in bigger stores. I'm starting to present to bigger buyers and owners. The orders start to get bigger. And so, of course, and I was a lifelong reader, lifelong learner. I mean, I've read every John Maxwell book and Jim Rohn and all the things. Very similar. But as we got to this bigger stage, I was thinking, I need to get better. And for whatever reason, negotiation bubbled up. And it was like, I need to become a better negotiator. I'm probably too easy, maybe I'm a little bit of a yes man, and everybody kind of always gets a yes. And I need to get better at negotiation because these numbers are getting bigger, right? So I started to lean into some of these books on negotiation. And they would be books like, hey, don't ever give something up without taking something in return, right? It's very tit for tat, if like, oh, you do this for them, you better be asking for something back. After all, they're not going to respect you if you don't. I mean, these were books that we're reading like, what does it mean if the buyer's sitting back like that, or, how they're positioned.
It was very tactic based.
Very tactic based. And so I started to, and we had momentum. It wasn't just me. It was me and a few other people in the business. We had momentum. I had momentum individually, but I started to change some of these things that was value. It was all about them. And I started to change those things. And in a very short order, the momentum started to slow down. It was, and we're talking about a couple weeks here. And the momentum, it was like, oh my gosh, this is not going as well as I thought. I thought, respect level would rise and the orders would rise. And instead people are like very uncomfortable on the phone. They're not liking this. I don't like how I'm feeling about myself. And so I'm a big story guy, a big parable guy, which I want to ask you about as well on the book. But I came across your book, which very shortly after it had come out. I think it came out in 2007. Am I right on that?
Yeah, the very, very end of 2007.
Okay,
yeah.
so it's like 2007, 2008. I come across this book. It's really short. It's very thin. It's red, so it stands out. And I'm thinking, I'm going to give this one a shot. And I read it so fast. I bought the Audible whenever that came out, and I was reading it and listening to it simultaneously, multiple rounds. And what it hit me with was it was like, oh, now it was not unconscious competent. Now it was like, oh, that's why we have this momentum. That's why we had it, is because we were kind of leaning in unconsciously to a lot of these go-giver principles and bringing value first and not keeping score. Right? Not this quid pro quo. If I do this, you do this kind of thing. And so, it hit me like a lightning bolt. I ditched those other books. I hadn't even finished those negotiation books. I ditched those. I don't even remember the names, but I wouldn't want to disparage them. But I knew that was not who I was, who I wanted to be. And I knew this is who I was, who I wanted to be. I called, kind of my right-hand man, Seamus Terry, who's been here 28 years. He leads our sales team. He's the best go-giver I've personally ever met. And he read it within a day. Same thing. He calls me up and he's like, this is the best book I've ever read. We're ordering copies. We're giving it away to everybody that we have. But I think the big thing that really hit me was this law of value. Okay. And it's, your true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment. And I can't remember if you say this line specifically in the book or not, but there was definitely this element of not keeping score. And I think for a lot of times in my career, giving this book away and talking to people about it, most people get that, but there's few times where that is a really hard thing for somebody to get over, is the keeping score. Have you found that?
Yeah. So there's a couple things. So first, love the fact that, you grew up with parents who set a great example for you. I did as well. Blessed, hashtag blessed, as they say these days, right? And one of the things that John and I heard from a lot of people after the book first came out, and it got off to a really good start. That doesn't always happen with the books, but we were fortunate that did. And the emails we would get, our first, if you want to say early adopters, were those people like you, people who had already lived their lives, been living their life, and they just related to the principles in the book. And of course, there's nothing new in the book, right?
Yeah, they're timeless principles.
Timeless principles, of course. And so, and we love hearing that. Was the second group of adopters that wrote to say, my sales manager or the CEO of the company, or they bought, X amount of books then we had to read it. And wow, those were the second ones. But the first ones were the ones who were doing this long before they ever came across the book. Just like you. So that was the first part. Okay, second thing I just want to talk about with when you say about the without the emotional demand, attachment, we call it, to receiving, right? So in other words, giving that value without it being tit for tat, right? Yeah, it's tough for people because it goes against human nature, right? And so one of my as human beings, we are self-interested creatures. That's reality, and we can deny reality, but it doesn't change anything. As I think Ben Shapiro says, the truth doesn't care about your feelings. So it's true. Right. Okay, so we are self-interest. Now, One of my great friends, his name is Dan Rockwell. He writes the Leadership Freak blog. Brilliant guy, and he says self-interest is normal, or self-focus is normal. Other focus is leadership. And what that means is we have the ability to understand that while, yes, we are self-interested as human beings, we can consciously place that to the side in order to focus on the other person. So one of the things I used to say when I was on the road speaking, which I'm not anymore, but when I was, I'd speak at big sales conferences, and one of the first things I would say, Joe, is nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet. Okay, they're not going to. They're not going to buy from you because you have a sales goal or because you need the money.
Yeah,
They're not
going to bed thinking about your sales quota.
Exactly right. They're not even going to buy from just because you're a nice person, even though I know you are, right? No, they're going to buy from you because they believe that they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so. And that's the only reason we can ever expect anyone to buy from us, right? Now, this is great news, of course, for the person who's very focused on serving others.
Yes.
Right? But even for that person who's not, they need to be able to embrace that the most self-interested thing they can do is to take their interest off themselves and place it on the other person, communicating that value, which of course we don't do by saying, hey, this is of great value, you should buy. No, it's by asking questions and listening and then matching the benefits of our product or service with what they need, want, or desire. And then the other thing, that third thing, is just that, when we talk about the law of value and we say give more in value than you take in payment, that can sound very counterintuitive when you first hear it. Give more in value than I take in payment. Isn't that a recipe for bankruptcy? And it simply means that we understand the difference between price and value. That price is a dollar figure. It's a dollar amount. It's finite. It is what it is. It's the price. Value, though, is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder.
Not
right?
Fixed.
Not fixed. What is it that they see as being of so much worth or value that they will willingly exchange, in this case, their money for it and feel great about it, while you also make a healthy profit. In fact, in any free market-based exchange, and when I say free market, I simply mean no one's forced to do business with anyone else, right? In any free market-based exchange, there should always be at least two profits: the buyer profits and the seller profits, because each of them come away better off afterwards than they were beforehand. This, by the way, is not to get political here, but it's why free market capitalism works.
So if we could stay there, you got there. That was on my list to ask you about, because when I was reading the About You section on your website, it mentions, and I think I might be paraphrasing here, but that Bob is a champion of the free market and free market enterprise,
yeah,
which I am as well. But in today's day and age, I mean, man, it's got a real black eye.
Oh,
but the way that you described it, I've heard of giving of when you interact relationally with people, this deposit and withdrawals. Like you're either giving deposits or you're doing with withdrawals. But I've never heard somebody articulate there's two profits. There's the profit for the person that you're serving, that you're bringing value, and then there's, of course, the profit for the person that's getting paid for it. And I love that. But I wonder if you did already. But so anything more that you'd like to say? Because I loved how you worded on that About You section about that, not just that you're a champion of free market enterprise, but why you're a champion of free market enterprise. Because I think that you are coming at it from a perspective that's very different than what is getting talked about in the news. For instance, if a business is doing well monetarily, or even an individual, it's like they must be doing it at the expense of somebody else. Could you talk a little bit about that?
That's such a shame. So when we're talking about true free market capitalism, not to be confused with what's called cronyism, where you've got a whether it's an industry, a big company, or any kind of special interest that through their lobbyists on K Street in Washington are buying special rules and regulations from government, right? That's not free market. That's not free market capitalism. That's cronyism. That is what, unfortunately, we have much too much of, I believe. Okay, but free market capitalism simply means that it's a choice, that people get to decide who they buy from, sell to, trade with, are in relationship with, buy for. You know what I'm saying? The entire business process is voluntary exchange. Now, what happens in that case? It means actually the pressure is on the company to be able to communicate their value because the consumer is the one who has the final choice. And this is, by the way, what Adam Smith was talking about in his Wealth of Nations.
Oh,
And
sure.
so,
Okay.
yeah. And so in through this, and again, we've never had total free market cap. But by the way, just so people don't think I'm some kind of anarchist, yeah, government they are responsible for protecting the rights of the individual, protecting the individual from force and fraud, of course. Other than that, to stay out of the way and simply create the environment for people to exchange freely with one another. Now, to the degree that we've had that, and we have to a certain degree, okay, that's the degree to which throughout the world where it's been allowed to happen, it's brought more people out of poverty in the last couple of 100 years than in the thousands and thousands of years previously.
Right. And it's not finite either. There's an ability right? The value can go, exponentially, infinitely.
And that's where in a free market, the value is infinite because, again, remember, both parties profit.
Right.
Now, what happens when both parties profit? The buyer is able to use the product or service for what they want. If it's in business, it's to create more business. If it's for personal, it's to enjoy life more. So you've increased your happiness. Okay, what does the business do when they profit when they profit financially? What are they allowed to do? Put more money into research and development, hire more people. The people who they pay salaries to go into the different stores in their town and they buy things, which helps. That really does work that way. And so Mondami's The Warmth of Collectivism, as he called it in New York City, how well has that worked? It has never worked, unless by work you mean putting people into dire poverty, hundreds of millions of deaths, and so forth.
Yeah,
so
amen
free
on
market
that.
capitalism works, but it needs to be free market capitalism, not cronyism.
Love that. There's so many lessons there. So we want to be cognizant of your time, and we're kind of coming up on the end of it, but I wanted to ask you about one other thing. And when I read the book, I mean, I was humming through there, loved every bit of it. I even love this part, but the part that really made me grind my gears to where like, oh, I really need to reread this. And I think I'm guessing a lot of early adopters, because this is what I've seen, early adopters on the Go Giver, when I give it to them, they fall in love. The area that sometimes they struggle with, and I struggled with, is the law of receptivity.
Sure.
Because the book is called The Go Giver. I fell in love with providing, all this value. I'm give. But this law of receptivity, the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That is the biggest challenge for just about everybody. Why? Well, let's go back to belief systems and the message from the world around us. Well, the law of receptivity says the key to effective giving is to stay open to receiving. Now, first, this means nothing more than understanding that, you breathe out, you also have to breathe in. It's not one or the other, it's both. You breathe out carbon dioxide, you breathe in oxygen. You breathe out, which is giving, you breathe in, which is receiving. Giving and receiving in flow, giving and receiving are not opposite concepts. They're simply two sides of the same coin. They work in tandem. But is that the message we get from the world around us? No, not really. And I mean pretty much, and remember, we are run by a set of unconscious beliefs that we took in from the time we were born all the way through, from upbringing, environment, schooling, news media, television shows, movies, popular culture, cultural mores, right? But by the time we're a little more than toddlers, the world has gotten to us with other messages, and as we grow up, it just gets more so. The world has an anti-prosperity bias, an anti-prosperity message. Probably always has, but whether or not for whatever reason, but you look at how people look at prosperity, money, business. Like you said earlier, you'd think that to make a fortune, you got to step on people's toes. You've got to be right. Now, by the way, there are people out there who do things as we would not like. It's a big world. There's a lot, right? But to any degree that no one's forced to do business with you, the only way you can get wealthy is by providing exceptional value to the lives of a lot of people, placing their interests first, being authentic to your core, and being able to receive. Now, what we really need to do is, I say this, I don't mean to say that so dogmatically, we need to do this, but my suggestion is make a study of prosperity, because the anti-prosperity garbage comes in from everywhere.
Right.
And so study people, and there's some great ones out there. Randy Gage, Sharon Lecter, Lisa Peterson, David Nagel. He's a great one. The late Bob Proctor. They teach prosperity mindset. And it's important to watch their videos and listen to their podcasts and read their books. Why? Because, again, we get so much of that anti-prosperity garbage coming into us. We need to fill our minds with the good stuff. And so yeah, that's why it's so difficult. So what happens, you look at them. Can I give you one quick example?
Oh, please,
Randy Gage shares this. He says, like in any great movie, or not any great movie, but any big selling movie, which a lot of times they are great movies, but there's usually two types of characters represented. There are the good people, who are typically represented as poor, struggling, honest, happy, and they're always being taken advantage of by who? The rich people, who are nasty and heartless and cruel and have no soul, right? And you see that everywhere. Not because there's some conspiracy out there to keep everybody poor. It's just what sells. Again, there's a lot, right? And so, but he gives this great example from the first Spider-Man movie. And Peter Parker and his Uncle Ben are sitting in the living room talking about being poor. And Uncle Ben says, well, Peter, we may not be rich, but at least we're honest. What a horrible, horrible message for some young teenage boy or teenage girl to listen to. Because what's the presupposition? What's the premise?
That if I'm honest, I'll be poor, and if I'm dishonest, I'll get rich. Yeah,
you're right. If you're honest, you have no chance of actually ever have right. But if you get wealthy, you must have done something wrong to get there. Now,
stepped on somebody.
But Burg, it's just a movie. Well, first of all, no, it's pretty much every movie. It's many books. It's a lot of TV shows. It's what you see on social media all the time, right? And so you grow up and you have these messages, again, unconsciously, not consciously, unconsciously. And then you start doing things, adding great value to the world and blah, 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 and money's starting to come your way. But now the unconscious says, wait a second. If I'm starting to make money, what does that say about me? What did I do to people? Was I dishonest?
Who am I exploiting?
Who am I exploiting?
To have gotten
who am I
to this?
exploiting? What will people think of me? And then you start sabotaging that, right? So that's why I think making a study of prosperity is one of the, we hit on it in the book, but in a parable, you can only go so deep. But really, these people who I mentioned, they do so much work in terms of just prosperity mindset that I think they're very well worth studying.
Well, if I might, Bob, just to kind of wrap it up, just to, I guess, back up your point is, so Vortex, we started in 2002 and we started at zero. We were the smallest sport optics brand that ever existed because we started at zero. And we were about 100 years late to the game. And it took us about, 13, 14 years to become the number one brand and then eventually become the largest brand that's ever existed. And that's cool. And I am proud of that. I'm proud of the team that got us there.
Sure.
But I'm more proud about how we got there. And I think it's a lot of these principles in the Go Giver and bringing value. And one of the things that we say is a lot of people, and this is another one of those dichotomies and things that gets fed into the media and probably movies that I would disagree with. So many people look at service as they must be being subservient.
Oh, exactly.
And we at Vortex has made service our superpower.
Exactly.
And I tell you one thing that kind of fits a little bit with that word prosperity that you're talking about. So we're really well known for our VIP warranty. It's a very important promise warranty. And the promise is that we're going to take care of you. We're going to repair or replace your optic for free, no matter what. You don't have to have your receipt. You don't have to fill out a warranty card. You don't have to have, you can just have pieces of the thing and you can send it in. And I mean, you'd be surprised how much we can repair, but if we can't repair it, we'll replace it and we'll do all that work within 5 days. And when you call, you're going to get a human being who's bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, empowered to help. They don't have a bunch of SOPs and a bunch of policies. The policy is to help you as a customer. And so interestingly enough is those timeless principles, because that is timeless, serving other people. Those things have been the biggest catalysts for us becoming that number one, the how. And I would say what trips, I think, a lot of people up, but I think you got to the heart of it. So here's what will happen sometimes is somebody will send something in and it's kind of a crazy story. And let's say they're in Costa Rica and they're birding and they drop a binocular down a ravine and it breaks and they call us up and we say, and they're like, well, I'm on the trip in Costa Rica. I know you'll repair it and replace it, but by the time I get home and send it to you, that's too late. And so we'll have somebody on the phone that'll think, you know what? I think we've got dealers in Costa Rica. And those dealers have got, these little vans that are all over the country. I bet you we can get a hold of one of those retailers, get a hold of one of those vans, and they're probably within 30, 45 minutes of this person. And then we can have them just give them a new bino and we'll set up with the retailer later. But what a lot of people will do is they'll say, wait a minute. We sell 3 million units of binoculars a year, okay? And if we did that for everyone, we'd go out of business. And the reality is, you're not going to have to do that for everybody. Not everybody's going to have that. So I like the phrase, I think it's from Andy Stanley, you do for one what you wish you could do for everyone, but you don't have to. And I think if you have that, prosperity, or you have this positive outlook on the world and positive outlook that most of your customers are not going to try to undermine you, they're not going to make up some story, what you're going to find is in the aggregate, you as a person and your business is going to flourish versus when you have that kind of glasses half full or scarcity mindset, is that you're not going to get any momentum going. And I think that's kind of what you're hitting on. And I think we're a good example of a real world example of how that mentality has played out.
Yeah. And again, the key to realize, which you have hit on, is when you said about service not being subservient, okay? Service being coming from strength, okay? You're actually tapping into human nature. Human nature is not most people are going to try to rip you off. That's not human nature, right? Human nature is you treat people well, and most people are going to appreciate. Now, are there ever people who, of course, that's also part of life. That's also real, but not in the aggregate. No, you do what you're doing, and you become the number one in in your field, which is what you did, and that's why you did. That's why you became number one, because you were doing the right things. Your focus was, how do I make this other person's experience so fantastic that they became, and I'll just tell you, and excuse me for turning my back.
Oh no, this is great.
A colleague of mine, his name is Richard Wildman. He wrote this amazing book called 100 Proven Ways to Acquire and Keep Clients for Life.
Oh, love it.
And he says, when you do the things that it's spectacular.
Yeah, I can tell by all the Post-its. That's a dead giveaway.
Yeah, and he says, when you do the things that you're doing, because this could come right out of his book, what you did. He says people will be what he calls delighted advocates for you and your business. Okay, so that person who you do that for in Costa Rica is telling every single person in there, you wouldn't believe what they did.
They're just compelled to do it.
Exactly.
And I love that. I'll have to pick that up. And by the way, we're going to be giving away many of these books when this podcast goes live. So in the notes, we'll kind of have some things on that. But I just want to thank you for the time. I mean, I could have talked to you for more hours. So for you to carve out this time means a lot. Again, you've been a huge catalyst for me personally, for our business. So I just want to thank you for that. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the wisdom that you've shared. And we're just going to wish you all the best. And again, thank you for bringing value to our audience today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Joe. Joe, thank you. And thank you, team, for me. Appreciate all of you.
I sure will. Thanks again, Bob. Listen, guys, movements are built on connection. If this resonated, share it and join the conversation. Hit that subscribe button or check the show notes where you can follow me on all my socials. Or check out more about the movement at vortexcare.com. Let's build something rare together.